Good morning, good morning. All right, let me go ahead and link the stream. We don't have a whole lot of time. All right. Okay, so we're going to go over some day trades. Just give me half a second to get situated. Now, again, we're going to be using 5-minute time frame and specifically looking at the Bollingers. Now, one thing I am looking at on the 30-minute time frame before we even try to identify a trade today is we do have this very, very, very nice and shoulders build. Now, if the dealers want this full level, then they're going to try to take that out. Okay. Almost certain. Now, 5-minute time frame. We are pushing into the lower Bollinger here, which can create the conditions to move upward. We'll go ahead and take a look at the VVIX here in a second. But potentially we can be having a small move upward from this. Now, the other thing I'm looking at here is from pre-market, we do have that nice candle. It does look like the market is trying to close this inverse cup to the downside. If that occurs, then very, very likely we'll have a call opportunity from that range up into the 20 mile, the 5-minute time frame. So that is a trade that I'm personally looking for. Now this entry level will be at the basically the 718.78 if they're going to fully aim to take that level out. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. I know it's been a while since I've streamed and everything. Okay, so I'm going to be watching that very closely. Hold on. I want to keep this SPY price open on my phone for a second, just so that we can properly look at some other stuff. Okay, all right. I got that open. So a couple things we're going to look at. What is going on with the VVIX? Now, I do apologize for all the colors on the screen, but again, they're very important. Um, we're still within this cautionary area on the VVIX, which oddly enough, it's looking like it might try to make a breakout here. So we'll be watching for that. Basically, we're looking for the VVIX to push above the 98 range. Once it pushes above that 98 range, that's when we know for sure that the selling is taking place. Just want to look at the 1-minute time frame here for a second. 1-minute time frame can be building a little bit of an inverse head and shoulders here, and also this double bottom using both of these candles. I don't think that's going to be the case though. I really do believe you see this inverse cup filled out. VVIX is at the 97.40, so On the 5 minute time frame, we see it's pushed up quite heavily. This gives us the conditions for VVIX to actually pull downward slightly, so that can create some of some buying conditions, excuse me. But we are primarily looking for this inverse cup to close before we take calls. Do you just want to watch this on the 1 minute time frame here for a second? So 1 minute time frame, I want to see some form of bearish structure forming. So potentially this smaller inverse cup closing here, pushing down to that lower Bollinger further. And VVIX is at the 97.35. So still telling us that we're kind of just chopping in this range. Now I'm going to take a look at semiconductors and everything here in a couple minutes, but I just want to make sure we're not going to be missing an entry or anything today. So on the 5 minute time frame here, I am expecting this 20 mile range to reject. If it doesn't reject, then those calls would have been great because that means we are going to the 5 minute upper Bollinger. We don't. But we still have a lot of structure to get through though prior to that. Now, again, I'm not going to be taking a short at the 20 mile here, even though I do think the potential for it is actually pretty good, especially if we see the VVIX tick upward, but we're not. It's at the 97.19, so it is slightly moving downward. Okay, this might be our push down that we're looking for here. Okay, so I want to go ahead and look at the options here. With these, I'm just looking at 0 DTE. Our 20 mile is at the 720. So if we can pull down all the way to this 718.83 range, then that will give us room on these 720 calls. So ideally, that's what I'm looking for. VVIX at the 97.18. So watch for this entry very closely. Watching for it on my phone, but I do want to look at a couple things really quick here. So oil, nice head and shoulders building there on the 5 minute time frame. But this can potentially be cup and forming the handle to the upside. So we will be watching for that. That would be a fairly bearish weight on the market overall. So potentially we do have this liquidity for this inverse head and shoulders. SPY, we're at the 719.50. So not hitting our level just yet. And I want to look at the VVIX again. Now, when I do have my desktop fully set up, I'll just have it to where the VVIX is always showing in like the right-hand corner. So that'll make things a lot easier. But until then, I have to kind of keep looking around. Look at the 1 minute time frame here. Not seeing any really strong bullish structure just yet. It's looking very, very likely this is wanting to come down and close that inverse cup to the 71926. From that inverse cup closing, we can be looking for a slight push upward, create the handle to then pull downward, which that would close this larger inverse cup on the 5 minute time frame. So that's sort of what I'm looking for on this 1 minute time frame here. I usually don't look at the 1 minute time frame too much, other than I'm trying to figure out basically the structure of the day, you know, what the dealers are trying to do. Now, in my video last night, I talked about kind of on the daily time frame that we're in between two really key levels. Okay, either we're going to be pushing for the daily upper Bollinger, which that's, roughly a whole $15 away from where we're at currently, or we're going to be trying to aim towards this 20 mod, having a 20 mod test because we haven't had a 20 mod test in over 20 sessions now. Not going to count it exactly, but it's been over 20 sessions now. So the 20 mod is starting to become, a point of contention that should be expected to be tested again. BBIX here still pulling down, so that's telling us that, potentially this can be curving up on the day. Not going to be entering any calls or anything just yet. Because on the 5 minute time frame, this can be a 20 mod rejection. So we just had to be sure of that. It's not looking good for the rejection side though, because the VVIX is currently at the 96.98. So that is slightly pulling downward. Do you want to look at this on the 5 minute time frame? Remember we did talk about how with this being in the upper Bollinger, this creates the conditions to where the VVIX can start pulling down slightly, which would mean buying on the day. So SPY here. Now, if we're trying to target the upside, which again, we have this very, very, very large head and shoulders built here. Um, this is why I'm kind of hesitant to just take a call just to, potentially have that push upward. Even though we are seeing the VVIX pulling downward slightly in the moment. Um, this is a very, very, very bearish structure. And if the dealers are going to, make use of it, then our downside is pretty large. Not expecting this to be taken entirely throughout today, but potentially over the next few sessions, we can see this taken out entirely. So, and the bottom of that level is at the 707.85, if I remember correctly. So back to the 1 minute time frame here. Just looking for structure. I want to delete some of these arrows just to clean this up slightly. Now, potentially, this can be some wonky cup. If that's the case, then it will aim for a handle to the downside to pull upward. And it would try to go essentially all the way back up towards this. And then that doesn't even look that good. But basically that 722 range. VVIX at the 96.78. So still holding that range where it's showing that the market can be potentially starting to buy. But I want to see some structure formed here. Good morning, everybody. So I want to look at semiconductors. Stocks says I want to look at stocks. So this is looking like it wants to push down. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty well-defined inverse cup right there. Sorry if I drew it wonky, but the liquidity is definitely there from this inverse cup. Should be aiming to form a handle to basically pull down towards that 455.12 range, which I'm actually looking for that potentially today. Might seem like a pretty big move for semiconductors to the downside, but we have been pushing up quite a bit over the last few sessions. We see on the video here, this head and shoulders did complete. And with that head and shoulders completing, actually starting to give us quite a bit of liquidity here for a larger head and shoulders. So that was the 30-minute time frame. Early just to kind of show that correlation a little better. 4-hour time frame. Sorry for all the drawings, but I haven't had a chance to clean up my NVIDIA chart. But potentially we have this cup here. From this cup, we are seeing the bearish structure we do expect at the top of a cup. Okay, and the reason why we expect that bearish structure is to pull downward to give us that handle. From pulling downward, that gives us the liquidity to start pushing, again into all-time highs. Just want to correlate a few different things here. We're seeing on QQQ as well. We have this very defined head and shoulders taking place, which the downside liquidity on that is all the way at the 666.72 range basically. So there's a lot of downside here. Um, if the dealers are wanting to go for it, EVIX still pulling downward slightly, so it's at the 96.34. We still have to be cautious though, because while it is within this yellow range, this means that they can both buy and sell. This isn't a very defined range in terms of where the market's going. Now, if we start pulling down into the green, that's going to be telling us that there's significant buying occurring. But if we pull back into this 98 range, that tells us that there's going to be some major selling occurring. So we are watching for that. 1 minute time frame here. Do you have this cup closing? From that cup closing, we are potentially closing this cup to the 720.61. Okay, and from that, we would be pulling down this 1 minute, 20 minute, or 1 minute, 20 mile, which would give us a handle to the downside. So even though I didn't take the call, I didn't like the call, 5 minute time frame, again, give the opportunity for a fairly decent call. It's not the best one though, unless we actually see it completely taking off today. On the 5 minute time frame here, with us pushing up, I'm actually wanting to take a short position. So I'm waiting for this to push upward into that 720.66. Hopefully we get that level. From that range, though, I'm going to be targeting the 719 puts. And again, this is just 0 TT. And I want to look at our VVIX. Still has quite a bit of room to be pulling downward. So we'll just, keep our eyes on that. Semiconductors are looking like they want to take this for 60. So, with that said, that gives room on some SOX S calls to the upside. So I want to go ahead and look at some of those. Actually, kind of just like taking that 13 call or even the 12.5 call just to grab that premium on it. So I'm actually going to be doing that here in just 1 second. And this is on SOX S. And I want to look at the SPY here. SPY very close to giving us our level any second here. So I will be taking the 719 puts as well. BVIX still holding this 96.24. So for me, that works just fine. Buy puts into. Okay, let me go ahead and get the SPY puts. Okay, so again, I'm taking the 719s. Okay, I'm currently in at 0.69. So we'll be watching those fairly closely. Again, we do have a lot of downside today. And on success here, do you want this 12.5 call, I think? No, I'm gonna take the 13 calls. Okay, so I filled those at 0.69 per. Same price as the SPY put. Okay, and now we wait. 5 minute time frame is telling us that we should be pulling downward. Now, from this pull downward, there isn't a whole lot of expanded room on the 5 minute time frame here. We're sort of sitting in this very, very heavy consolidation. So we are really expecting the Bollingers to open up, meaning we're expecting a large push to the upside or a very large push to the downside. Okay. And I just want to look at the VVIX again. So it's at the 96.19. So that is telling us potentially there is buying here. So we are just going to be watching those short positions very closely. But overall, on the day, I have been seeing bearish structure, so I am trying to target that. And I want to look at semiconductors. Still holding some of that bearish structure. If semiconductors reject here, this actually creates a smaller head and shoulders. So I am looking for that. Look at VVIX. Still holding this 96.15. Did pull down to the 96.12. So thing about the VVIX is that every penny to the upside means that dealers are actively hedging. When it moves downward, that doesn't really give us a whole lot of signals other than it's showing that dealers aren't hedging. Um, so it doesn't always correlate to buying when you see the VVIX pulling downward. This can be more so the lack of, just buying the insurance. So not a super clear signal on the VVIX yet, um, but it is still elevated. And I actually want to take a look at, see, I want to look at NVIDIA, a few other. Okay, so NVIDIA did give us the rejection that we were looking for. This is a smaller inverse cup closing. From that cup closing, we should be expecting a slight pull upward into forming the handle downward. So NVIDIA definitely looks like it wants to take out this 196.50. And on SPY here, if NVIDIA takes out that level, it will give us our major drop down in SPY. So we will be looking for that. Look at the VIX again. Still holding this 96.12 range. And get USO here. So USO, pretty bearish structure forming there, but again, this can create the conditions for the buying, excuse me. I could talk properly. This could be, this handle to the upside for oil. No, I'm not getting rid of my drip positions. I'm holding on to those. And VVIX is pushing a new low of the day, so we can potentially be seeing some buying here. I'm still just holding on to these positions pretty tightly as we do see NVIDIA having a little bit of that selling. Selling on NVIDIA looks pretty good. Um, Again, this 196.50 range looks extremely primed. So very likely we see a small handle to the upside before pulling downward further. But the inverse cup did close. We do see the ADL on the day pulling downward. QQQ, we saw the ADL pulling downward and now slightly pulling up a little bit. So if we don't have some major rejection within QQQ, kind of same thing here with SPY, we can expect this cup to close to the upside. But it's still kind of at a contention point here with us pushing this upper Bollinger on the 5-minute time frame here. That gives a lot of conditions to start pulling downward. So we are watching that very closely. Same with the SPY here. Even though we are making a new high of the day, VVIX pulling down to the 95.89, well, 95.90 now. And I want to look at Microsoft. Liquid is showing that we do have a little bit of selling on the day. So we should be seeing this within the HIG as well. Actually, quite a bit of selling on the day on HIG. So with HIG and liquid selling, that could be showing some major equity weakness, even though we are seeing a little bit of buying occurring currently. Microsoft did have a nice upside move, but the ADL has been pulling downward. Should be expecting this for 14-15 range. Um, for the 5-minute time frame to hold on to the 20 mo. Potentially on Microsoft here, have this cup forming with the bearish structure forming at the top. We always expect bearish structure at the top of a cup to give us that handle to the upside. Hourly time frame, we do have this inverse cup that has closed. Very indecisive day. It's hard to tell if dealers are just trying to form these handles on these larger inverse cups slash head and shoulders, or if we're trying to take potentially inverse head and shoulders up to that, you know, 445 again. Now this is on the hourly time frame, so that is much larger structure. SPY still not giving us anything decisive yet. BVIX still pulling downward. So I am going to be expecting this 20 MA to be pulling upward, BVIX potentially pulling downward all the way to the 95, basically that 95.40 range. From that 95.40 range, I will be looking for that major bounce to the upside in terms of volatility. Because again, here with SPY, we're really not seeing a lot of this bullish structure completing. We do have this smaller cup formed here, and potentially that can again form a handle and then pull us upward towards that 721, 722 range. As long as we continue seeing the VVIX pulling downward, then that's what would be occurring. VVIX still at the 95.77. Good morning, everybody. We're just trying to fully figure out where the big move of the day is, because currently this has been pretty much nothing but chop. Um, but with some of this chop, we do have some smaller structure building. We see how on the 5-minute time frame we had this inverse cup built here that has been invalidated. With that invalidation, that can once again be alluding to this larger cup to the upside. Now, again, I'm currently in short positions. I do see a lot of downside within the day. The volatility might be pulling downward slightly in the current moment, but overall it is still very elevated on the day. So if we do start seeing volatility picking back upward, that'd be a very, decisive signal that market does want to claim that downside that we're looking for. QQQ here, still just building out this right shoulder. So I'm kind of expecting a lot of chop in that range prior to us fully pulling downward. So we will be watching for that. And on SPY here, again, this can still be this right shoulder liquidity. And the downside is quite low. I mean, not that I'm expecting it today, but we could be hitting all the way to the 707 range. Um, Highly unlikely. It's very likely we would take more so this 716.46 and aim to build a smaller handle from that prior to pulling downwards. So that would look like something like that before fully trying to that level out. Slow day so far. Look at Micron here. Micron has quite a bit of room to the downside here with the 5-minute time frame. It's telling us that potentially we could be pulling all the way from this 592 all the way to this 566, which seems very, very large on the day, but um, potentially that weight can be coming downward. If that does occur, then that will be pulling down a large majority of the market. So maybe this is our signal here. BVIX still holding this 95.74 range. Yeah, so we're going to be watching Micron pretty closely here. Because if Micron is aiming to have a major pull down on the 5-minute time frame, then it's going to pull down again a large majority of the market with it. And I want to go ahead and look back up at the BVIX. BVIX did pull down to this 95.40 range that we're talking about. It actually moved all the way down to, or no, it's at the low of the low today so far. So we are starting to see the price closing into this 20 mile range on our volatility. That can create the conditions for a fairly large bounce to the upside in terms of our volatility. So we are going to be looking for that very closely. SPY here still not giving us a whole lot to work with. Even on the 1 minute time frame here, we still have this head and shoulders. And if we continue pushing downward, this will work to invalidate this cup. But we do need to see this push down basically to the 719.26. Okay. From that 719.26, that would close an inverse cup slash build this smaller head and shoulders on the day, which would, then start taking us down to that 718.83 and the 716, what was it, 716.65 if I remember right? No, 716.45. So starting to see some bearish structure here, like we have been looking for. Now VVIX is seeing some buying, so this did pull down all the way to the 95.47. It is back up to the 95.66, 95, or excuse me, 95.75 now. So ticking upward fairly quickly. Semiconductors. Hold on, I want to look at Micron. Micron is really the big one of the day. Um, that's going to really decide the structure of the day. Either we are going to see this very large pull down on the 5 minute time frame, which this pull down is a whole $20. So if you're really wanting to have a super killer short, then potentially right there could do it. I'm not going to engage that though, just because that's going to be expensive as heck. Oh, I'm not down for that this morning. Um, However, Pig is still seeing selling, and let's check Liquid. Liquid is still seeing selling on the day, so again, we talked about earlier how those can be some signals of potential major selling getting ready to occur on the day. BVIX here at the 95.70. SPY still looks like it's building out this smaller head and shoulders. The ADL on the 5 minute time frame isn't too impressive either. Um, it's actually starting to look a little bit like a head and shoulders. So if we don't see major buying starting to occur here, then we should be seeing the ADL pulling into the negative on the day, which that would mean we would be selling. Now, I do want to look at NVIDIA. NVIDIA still looks super good to take out this 196 level. Micron on the 1 minute time frame, still holding this potential head and shoulders here. So again, if this liquidity is going to be taken, then our downside is very, very large. Potentially on semiconductors, this can be this cup and handle forming. So we will be looking for that very closely. I'm not exiting any of my short positions just yet. VVIX pulling down very, very close to this 20 mile range. So again, what I'm looking for is a bounce off this 20 mile on the 5 minute time frame. If we don't bounce, if we continue pulling under the 20 mile, then that will be a very clear signal that there is buying on the day. A 5 minute time frame. Let's see where you go. Did complete smaller cup, so we can go ahead and delete some of that prior structure. No, I'm not exiting puts yet because again, on the 30 minute time frame, we have this massive, massive bearish structure, and also on the 30 minute time frame, with the market price going from the lower Bollinger up towards that 20 mile, that can give us the conditions to start forming a rejection. So again, I'm looking a lot at the downside today. I know some may not agree with that, but we have a lot of conditions that can really be, triggering that. Um, as long as the VVIX is in this yellow range, this isn't a very clear signal. Again, this could mean both buying and selling. So it's very hard to tell with the VVIX kind of just hovering here. Now, yes, the VVIX has pulled down $2 today, but if we're going to be seeing buying to the upside in terms of the VVIX, then that $2 downside will close very, very quickly. Oil still just kind of hovering in place. I am going to go ahead and add into those 719 puts here. So our previous buy-in was at 0.69. So I'm just going to be adding a couple positions to it. Okay, and you could buy those at the 0.45. So our average is currently at 0.56. Okay, so again, I'm still shorting here, looking for a rejection off this 30-minute time frame, off this 20 ma. 5-minute time frame, we are pushed into the upper Bollinger, so even then, that's telling us the conditions for a short position have opened. So we're going to start targeting some of this downside. Now, with the VVIX here on the 5-minute time frame, it has pulled down to the 20 ma. From this 20 ma, I really am looking for this to bounce to the upside. Again, if we don't see a bounce here, then that will be telling us that there will be continued buying on the day throughout equities. So that would be our signal to kind of exit those short positions. But with the larger bearish structures formed here, um, I do really want to be looking towards this downside. Semiconductors, this right shoulder is actually playing out very well. And I need to go grab a blanket here in a second because my house is like 50 degrees or something. I am absolutely freezing. I want to look at Micron. Now again, Micron, we have a ton of downside potentially. Still building out this right shoulder. And one thing on Micron that is very telling here, so far anyway, is that within this right shoulder that we are seeing build, we're not seeing invalidation, or we're not seeing a upward cup close. Um, with that upward cup not closing, um, this is telling us that pretty much this is entirely bearish structure currently. So the downside on Micron is absolutely huge right now. I don't know what news sent that upward so much, but the downside is absurdly large on Micron. Meta getting pounded. Microsoft here, not fully closing this cup to the upside yet. So that can give us bearish structure, but we will be watching that fairly closely. QQQ, hold on, look at SPY. And I want to look at the VVIX again. So no major buy up yet. We're going to be watching this very closely. Again, if we don't see a tick upward within the VVIX very, very soon here, then we will go ahead and exit the short positions. But with the 5-minute time frame giving us the upper Bollinger here, I want to delete that because that's ugly. Um, with the 5-minute time frame giving us this upper Bollinger, this is telling us that the short positions are very available. But we have to be very cautious because, again, we can complete this cup towards the basically right at this 121.82. From that 121.82, we would be looking for bearish structure. So these short positions, regardless, should be hitting one way or another. So no, I'm not closing those just yet. BVIX still holding this range. Again, we're expecting to see a pretty large tick to the upside if we're going to be seeing the selling that I'm expecting us to see. Semiconductors continuing this bearish structure here. Go ahead, this purple. And I want to look at Micron again. One thing that makes me mad about Micron is that I don't remember when, but it dropped down to like $77, and I told everybody that it was a really good opportunity to buy into it. Um, I didn't buy in at the time just because I forgot to take the order. And well, now Micron's close to the 600 range, so one of those trades that I kind of bite myself over. I were looking for either a rejection prior to this cup closing, which would give us an even larger bearish structure on the day, because this would then turn into a large head and shoulders. But if we see this cup close, which again, it's very, very close, all we have to do is push up towards that 121.77 range, so only another 20 cents away. I don't think that's very unreasonable for that to be hit at all. DVIX not bouncing. So with this cup closing, which hasn't yet, just have to be very patient for that level, but should close any second. With that cup closing, we should be looking for bearish structure. Even if this is a bullish structure in the grand scheme of things, we should be looking for a bearish structure from the top here. Bearish structure gives us the handle to the downside. From the handle to the downside, that would create the conditions to head to the 20 mile here and then bounce upward. Okay. So again, I'm targeting the 719 puts, and I am adding just a couple more here. Have already a few. Okay, so I'm going to buy in at 0.36. Okay, total average is at 0.46. Now, for me primarily, I'm waiting for a major bounce in the VVIX. And technically, we've not fully closed this cup yet. It looks like it, but it has not fully closed. Um, with that cup not fully closing, if we do have rejection from here, then that will allude into this much larger inverse cup and the handle forming, because that'd be showing that it basically hasn't set a new high above this level. So as long as that doesn't happen, then this can get very bearish. VVIX still just moving downward though, so that's not telling us that we're going to be seeing that bearish weight on the day. But we're starting to see some bearish signals though. Again, with semiconductors here. Oh yeah, that's a very nice first cup. And it has a handle build. Okay, so that's telling us that semiconductors are expecting some downside. QQQ has not invalidated this head and shoulders just yet. We would have to set basically, a level above this to invalidate it. So far, that's not the case. I want to look at the HIG. Saw a little bit of buying in the HIG here. We will watch this fairly closely. Within the time and sales, I'm seeing fairly large amount of shares being sold. So we will see if this selling picks up in the HIG and liquid. On the SPY here, we have not fully closed that level. I know it's only 5 cents, but there's been multiple times before where this exact structure has happened, and we've just had a massive rejection on the day because it didn't fully close that cup. So as long as that cup is not fully closed, we are looking at this as a head and shoulders. Our VVIX is still just pulling downward. I'll look at Micron again here. Micron's really telling us that it wants to head downward. See this head and shoulders really starting to complete. So quite a lot of downside within Micron here. And again, that downside's kind of what I'm really looking for the overall market to head to the downside. We also have very bearish structure built within NVIDIA here. I'm looking for this 196.50 range to be taken out. We actually have a smaller head and shoulders on the 5-minute time frame. So again, looking to the downside, even though it's it's tough. It's tough out here being a bear, but not always bearish. Only on days where things are weird. And today is one of those days, so see, I think the day would have been overall extremely I could talk, right? Extremely bearish if we didn't see this massive pull upward in Micron right on open. I'm not checking the news on it or anything right this second, but whatever that was, it caused quite a bit of buying throughout the market. But we still see a ton of bear structure throughout the majority of the market. And when we see that, it makes it very hard to take calls to the upside. Now, my SOX S calls are actually starting to head into the profit. Just waiting for our SPY puts to give us the same. Now, remember the SOX S calls we took, um, was targeting the upside. I took the 13 calls. I was originally wanting to take the 12.5s, but took the 13 calls. Now, these are a full 5 days by inception, so that means that these will be expiring on Friday. 1 second, everybody. Sorry, just had to tell my wife bye. Anyway, SPY's looking bullish, but it can be very deceptive here today. Okay, especially when we're starting to see semiconductors really fill out a lot of this bearish structure. Um, my SOXS calls are now technically in the money, so that's telling me that we can be seeing the selling picking upward. Within the VVIX, we did pull down all the way to the 95.14. It's at the 95.25 currently, so this might be that turnaround that I was talking about earlier, where we pull down the 20 mall and then start seeing that bounce back to the upside. Look at the time frame here. Now we are starting to see some bearish structure building within the 1 minute time frame. Long as we don't see too much more buying in the current moment, because that would be giving us this smaller head and shoulders. Really trying not to be biased on the day, but when we see the Hig and liquid being pulled downward, um, as well as kind of an overshoot within Micron, which, you know, I wish we shorted this today. I wish I shorted it anyway. I don't know if any of you did, but we did call this out. Um, Micron pulled upward very, very aggressively this morning, which gave kind of that overshoot into the overall market. Um, that overshoot did invalidate some of the earlier bearish structure. However, overall, um, it still looks fairly bearish, um, in the grand scheme of things. The only thing that is really concerning for me in terms of the bearish side is that we do need to see our volatility picking up. Currently, our volatility is just holding very, very flat. Now, potentially getting ready to close this cup to the upside. Remember, we were only a few cents away, so if they do aim to take that level, then they do need to take those few cents. All right, just want to watch this very closely because every penny really, really does matter here. It's the 72. Okay, and the cup officially has been closed. With that cup being closed, we are now looking for this bearish structure and for the handle to the downside, which is specifically why I'm not closing my puts currently. BVIX here is still holding the same position, so potentially we can be seeing that bounce upwards. Excuse me, sorry, I'm just looking at semiconductors. And semiconductors too have been very, very, very bearish. So when we have our semiconductors looking very bearish, other than basically Micron, um, I mean, Nvidia is still giving us our weight to the downside. It really looks like Micron was just that overshoot on the day. I do want to look at Microsoft here. Microsoft is giving us quite a bit of buying too, so we can't ignore that. Potentially heading to this for 22.28. Um, the 1 minute time frame. That is a very nice cup and handle. So Microsoft is looking bullish. So as you can see, just there's a lot of conflicting signals in terms of where I'm really expecting the day to go. And I want to look at the daily time frame because where is the 20 mile or the 5 mile? So the 5 mile is currently at the 6, or excuse me, the 716.84. Now that does coincide extremely well with some of this downside we were expecting earlier. And no, I don't consider this a 5 mile test in here. But 5 mile is basically right there. So that should be a range that we should be trying to gravitate towards overall because the range outside of that would be trying to head for this upper Bollinger, which the upper Bollinger again is at the 736. So yeah, it would make a lot more sense for that 5 mile range to be taken at this level. Especially when we again are seeing semiconductors looking very, very bearish. Today is one of those days where we have tech mainly holding a lot of weight up and find QQQ. But even within QQQ, we have not closed this upward cup yet. Um, with this upward cup not being closed, this is still telling me that this is bearish structure. So even though SPY is fighting us on the price a little bit, um, I am still looking for the downside quite heavily today. VVIX slowly starting to tick upward, but again, we want to see, multiple dollars of upside starting to occur. USO is starting to head upward. I haven't been able to check the news on it. Hold on one second. Pig still looking very bearish. It's a very tough day because our semiconductors are bearish, besides Micron. And even then, Micron's still giving us some of that selling to the downside that we have been expecting. Then we see liquid still selling to the downside. Excuse me. But then we have Microsoft giving us mixed signals. A little bit of buying, but potentially can be heading downward. Smaller cup being formed here on SPY. While that's occurring, the VVIX is pulling upward. So, again, very conflicting signals here. Semiconductors closing that cup, closed that handle, and now closed this larger inverse cup. So from that larger inverse cup, we can be expecting its head and shoulders to come through. From the head and shoulders, the downside is pretty large. So that's our target. Calls here I can't justify buying into unless you bought in when we were at the lower Bollinger earlier today. This 5 minute time, or this 1 minute time frame. I want to go to the 5 minute time frame. But at the 5-minute time frame, we talked about how potentially this could be a good call to the upside, which it would have been. That would have been a very nice call to the upside, roughly $3 of weight. I personally didn't take it, just because of some of the mixed signals on the day. So for me, I'm gonna circle this as a missed entry. Now, with us in the 5-minute time frame being in this upper Bollinger, it's still hard for me to justify taking calls to the upside because just like we see how down here, um, with we were in the lower Bollinger and it pushed us all the way up to the upper Bollinger, that can also happen from the upper Bollinger to the lower Bollinger. So it's hard to justify taking calls here, especially when we're seeing the VVIX starting to pull upward. Kind of exactly what we were looking for is this VVIX to start pulling up on the 20 or on the 5-minute time frame at that 20 mo. So as long as we can see the VVIX take above that level and start heading to the upper Bollinger again, then that's going to be telling us that the selling will be occurring on the day. But until then, it's basically just in buying mode. Let's see if we get this validated. Not yet. I want to look at, hold on, I want to look at the dollar. Dollar pulling downward slightly today. Well, we did have a pull upward, but since then it's been pulling downward. Micron, still bearish structure forming here. So I'm basically expecting just a small little handle to continue pushing us downward. We're still seeing the HIG holding its range, which if equities were going to be bullish, we would be seeing the HIG buying up further, which is telling, to me, that's telling me that very likely today will end up into a selling day. It's just currently we're not seeing that reflected within the SPY. The VVIX still pulling upward. Semiconductors working on this right shoulder that we've been talking about. So yeah, it's hard for me to be bullish here when we're seeing conflicting signals like that. Um, so I do apologize for not taking those calls earlier. Um, but again, conflicting signals on the day, and at this time I didn't see that Micron was up 8%, or else that would have been a very nice signal to see that, oh yeah, there's a ton of weight moving into semiconductors. So no, I have not exited the short positions yet. I see that overall semiconductors are looking to build bearish structure to the downside, which to me, really it's semiconductors that have been holding a lot of the weight of the day, especially Micron. And we're seeing our VVIX starting to pull back upward, which is telling us that dealers are hedging positions. Generally, dealers are only going to be hedging positions if you're going to be seeing downside. Usually don't see the VVIX seeing buying into a market that's preparing to leg upward. So conflicting signals, but we're still holding our short positions. Anyway, I'll be right back in a couple minutes here, but we're just going to watch the VVIX while I am on for the moment. We're still seeing this pull upward. So for me, I'm, as long as we're seeing this pull upward above this 20 mile again, this is telling me dealers are having to hedge, which means that very, very likely today will turn into a selling day if we see, dealers continuing to hedge at this point. Just want to look at Micron and everything really quick. I still see a ton of downside in Micron today. Not sure what news pushed it up. Haven't been able to check, but something caused it to move up 8% in, basically right after the market opened. And I am looking for bearish structure here, even if this is a bullish day. I would be looking for bearish structure here regardless. So even if I did take those calls, I would have been exiting them up in this range, and I would have been positioning for shorts, specifically for this handle to the downside. So no, not exiting my short positions. I still think they're very, very fine. The only thing is we may have to exit on this 720.68 rather than, pulling all the way down, but we will talk about that once we get there. BVIX is starting to pull upward quite a bit. It was at the 95.14. It's all the way back up at the 96. So, okay, I'm going to AFK literally maybe 5 minutes tops. And it's what, 10:07. So let's say, okay, 10:52. Because I need to go take my medication really quick and I need to make some coffee. So I will be right back, everybody. All right, everybody, I'm back. Okay, let's go over everything. I do apologize if I sound super tired. I've been going through a lot over the last month. Um, and it's gonna take a few days to really work its way out of the system. Semiconductors still bearish. Okay, our head and shoulders here is super, super strong, and this should take us down on the day. Okay. Even if SPY overall does look somewhat bullish currently. This head and shoulders is extremely, extremely strong, and that liquidity is right at that 460.14. So those success calls that we have should be absolutely kicking butt later. Now, in terms of, hold on, I want to see VVIX, still holding this 96, so that is good for us. SPY starting to potentially build this bearish structure at the top of this cup. So potentially it's head and shoulders. But I do want to look at Micron because again, Micron's really carrying a ton of weight today. So even Micron's still telling us that it wants downward. And Microsoft starting to tell us it wants downward. So a lot of signals are telling us that the downside is really wanting to kick in as much as it looks deceiving. Um, Big reason why I'm continuing to hold my puts here. I do see the downside. I do believe that the market is going to try to aim for that, especially when we're seeing buying within our VVIX here. Dealers do not buy VVIX unless there's an absolute necessity. Um, That's just kind of how the VVIX works. It will always be trickling downward until dealers start buying the insurance. But second dealers start buying the insurance, that's a very, very, very telling signal because that's telling you that they're hedging, they're preparing to hedge for a move to the downside. Now, we are seeing oil still chopping, but starting to pull upwards slightly. And what else do we got here? Just more waiting within the SPY. So yeah, just holding short positions and waiting. Overall though, kind of a deceiving day. Because again, we had some major bearish signals towards the open, but it's kind of hard to be bearish when Micron decides to run 8% literally right at the open. Um, so that's not standard. Usually don't see that type of price action within the day, but I do think that that was what kind of swapped some of this bearishness to the bullishness that we've been seeing. But we're still seeing some of our other instruments really picking up what we're expecting. For example, VVIX. Yes, we had this massive pull down, but this correlates almost one-to-one with that pull upward in Micron. So dealers had no reason to hedge at that point. if there's going to be, roughly that 8% move upward in Micron. But now we're starting to see dealers hedging. And it's, the low of the VVIX was at that 95.17. We're currently at the 96.20, so that has been steadily being bought upward. Again, dealers generally don't buy insurance to the upside if they're expecting the market to have a breakout. Um, Usually you buy that if you're expecting the market to drop. So, and with that, we also have the HIG continuing to sell and liquid continuing to sell, which HIG and liquid are the high yield and um excuse me, I'm having a my brain's just freezing for a second. It's the high yield and the investment grade corporate bond ETFs. So usually if you're going to be seeing equities pushing to the upside, you wouldn't be seeing big selling. You wouldn't be seeing liquid selling. You'd be seeing major buying within liquid and HIG because these are pretty much the upper tranches of equities. So if there's equity weight to be gained to the upside, you'll really see that reflected within the HIG and liquid. But we're not seeing that today. We're not seeing that reflected within those numbers. We're actually seeing the opposite. And we are also seeing the opposite with the VVIX continuing to start pulling upward again. Um, this is not indicative of a bullish market. This is indicative of, dealers are preparing to hedge for a leg to the downside. We also see then, let's check back to Micron. Micron was at the 592.77. It pulled down to the what? 579.08. Currently back up to the 584.70. So if Micron aims for bullish structure on the day and it tries to essentially fill this cup back up to the upside, then the market's going to be bullish for the day and nothing more we could do about that. But if we continue to see rejection downward, if we see this handle taken like we're expecting, we see this pull back down to this 579 range, then that's going to be telling us, almost verbatim that we will be heading downward on the day throughout, semiconductors, tech, everything. On semiconductors, we have pretty much nothing but bearish signal or bearish structure built on the day. We do have a very, very small micro, potentially cup and handle forming here, but that does not look very strong at all. Um, it looks very much so like this head and shoulders is going to complete and take us down to that 460. Okay, that was a mouthful. Does anybody have any questions or anything now that I've been basically talking for like an hour and a half straight? Starting to see this pull downward in SPY. Now again, being safe, if you're on a small portfolio, you need to exit at the 20 mile here on the 5-minute time frame. Okay, the 20 mile is at the 720.86. However, if you do have running positions, try to allow some of those runners to run because, again, I do see massive downside on the day. Now, when I say a small portfolio, this means that if you only have a single put position here, and say you took a put anywhere in this range, right? I at least want you to try to get your money out of that put. Okay. Even if you okay, here's first initial exit. So hold on. Let me have to pull up my phone. That dropped really quickly. So it's like, for example, even though we bought the 719 puts, um, beginning at that 0.69, it's better to exit at this range if you only have the single put, selling it basically for that 0.70 or that 0.48, taking that, $20 loss instead of it potentially having a full-on rejection of this range, pulling back to the upside, and then you'd be out, the entire 60 something dollars on the day. Now, that's why I say that for, accounts with just one or two positions going, because if that's the case, you have to play safe rather than try to risk it. Um, Even though we're seeing a ton of downside on the day overall, um, that's the thesis of how you trade without absolutely burning your account on a smaller portfolio. Um, but with portfolios that can hold the further positions, you would have taken a very, very small loss in some of those contracts there, and now you basically wait for the rest of the move to occur. So that's how that works. Okay, cool. So now we're gonna wait for further bearish structure here. Micron seeing that rejection that we were talking about, so we're expecting this to continue to head back down that 579. And let's check the VIX. And our VVIX is really starting to wake up. Again, this is dealers telling you, verbatim, hey, we're buying insurance, we're seeing downside. So, better late than never, I always say, right? It's okay though. Let's see what we got in terms of trade entries. So currently I'm pretty much holding all of my puts. Um, Within the HIG, we see a leg downward, um, as well as that leg upward within the VVIX. This is telling us that, you know, it's extremely likely we're going to be trying to head for this 716 range today. So with that said, now that this Head and Shoulders has completed so far, well, not fully. We could still build right shoulder liquidity. We do have this smaller inverse cup completed though. Okay, which should tell us that there is going to be another entry here into puts. Okay. Now, do I expect us to pull all the way back up towards the upper Bollinger on the 5-minute time frame here? No, not at all. I actually think that if you're going to start targeting puts, it's kind of getting into that range because what's going to happen is if we have the chop, we're going to see the upper Bollinger pulling downward while we see the 20 ma kind of just chop in the center. And then there'll be, the prices meeting between that. And then that would be your, super primed entry. But we're already at a very quality range to be entering these puts, and especially if we don't get that further right shoulder, um, then this is going to head down very, very quickly. Okay, so I do like the puts here. Generally, I don't suggest taking puts at the 20 ma, but today is one of those days where it could be really good. And I want to look at the VVIX here as we're continuing to head upward. So yeah, this is almost playing out to the T of what I was expecting. Um, Other than we had that overshoot very, very early on in Micron that we did not catch. Which this was what caused the bullish structure on the day. And we're actually going to write that in a note, which this is actually a really cool system that Webull has. So put that in the box. It'd probably help if I turn the text on and change it to white. Okay, so reason why I mark that is because now this is a note I can go back to later. Okay, and whenever you're trading, you should be trying to add notes like this when you see plays either work in your favor or not work in your favor. Um, Adding notes like this is very, very quality to learning, further your learning within your trading. So, for example, today we saw a ton of bear structure, but we absolutely missed that Micron move. Um, if we saw Micron moving up 8% earlier in the morning, we would have waited for that upper Bollinger up here before we took any of the puts on the day, including the SPY, those success calls. Those success calls are basically semiconductor puts. Um, this would have been the telling signal. So I definitely want this marked out because obviously we missed this signal. And this was a very, very crucial signal to not miss. But overall on the day, we've been seeing massive bearish structure. Um, is basically that move out of Micron that really threw the market for the loop because it caused this massive leg downward in volatility. But now that Micron's starting to slow down a little bit with the buying, you're starting to see more selling within semiconductors and everything. Now dealers are pulling all this volatility weight back upward. So should turn into a very nice selling day today. I'm gonna say bye to my daughter really quick before she heads to school, so I'll be right back in just a couple seconds. Alrighty, everybody, I am back. Apologize for that. So usually at this point, I'd be getting ready to end the stream. Um, just gonna stick around for a little bit longer. I do want to make sure that we get our move to the downside, but I think that's starting to become very, very obvious with how the VVIX is moving here. We're seeing oil ticking upward, which no, I'm not gonna be exiting my drip positions. I don't want to hear anybody say anything about that yet. I'm holding those suckers. Now for SPY, we should be seeing the 716 coming in today. Okay. And the primary reason for that is because that is where the 5 mile is. The 5 mile is at the 716.67. And oddly enough, that is pretty much right. I'll see. Right about there. Okay. What this does is this opens up the 5 mile test, which we will just mark out the entirety of this test. Roughly $1 to $2 to the upside and downside. So we will mark this range. Okay. I'm going to move that up slightly higher just because I don't want the text to be blocked off. But that's what we're looking for today. Okay. Now, once we start testing the bounds of the 5 mile, that gives us a few different levels. Okay, that gives us the upper bounds of the 5 mile. That gives us the 5 mile itself, and that also gives us the lower bounds of the 5 mile. So even though today I'm 100% targeting this the 716.46, the bounds of the 5 mile test is telling us that potentially we could be heading all the way to this 714. Okay. That's why I was saying that today we have a lot of downside. It was very hard for me to look at the market today and be bullish into it. So I'm very happy that we took our short positions. Um, Everybody should be doing absolutely well in those right now. And with our VBIX getting ready to push into the high of the day, um, this is telling us almost to a T of what's expecting to happen. Now, with volatility, I usually don't try to focus on structure, but structure does exist within volatility as well because obviously dealers are trading this. Okay, if dealers are touching any instrument, then structure definitely applies to it. Um, we can expect this cup to close, and from the top of this cup, potentially pulling down very, very slightly before fully heading upward into that, you know, red danger selling zone. So have a little bit of an expectation that we're going to be seeing a little bit more chop within the SPY and everything here. This chop still needs to build this right shoulder out. Um, this again could be literally hours still of chopping basically at this 720 level before we fully pull down. So what I would highly suggest is, if you're going to be sitting here watching it the entire time, I can't, unfortunately. Usually around this 11 o'clock a.m. time, I have to start getting ready to cut out. But what we're looking for is a couple things on the bearish side. Is that what's going on with our high yield and investment grade credit? Well, it's selling. Okay. When this is selling, this means that the upper echelon of equities is not going to be purchased out. Okay. So this is a very, 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 very huge signal that today is going to be a selling day. Same thing with liquid. We're seeing, technically, we saw liquid pull down um, a whole dollar since the pre-market, um, and still pushing downward. So our investment grade corporate credit is telling us, no, we don't want to buy that top end. We also see Micron, after hitting that high, has been really tapering out, and it does look like it wants to fall. Um, Again, I'd be extremely surprised if we don't see that below that 579 range today. And semiconductors overall finally breaking into that red liquidity zone, which this red liquidity zone does lead to the 640, or excuse me, the 460. I have that dyslexia with numbers and I forget the name of it, but it took me a really long time through college to um be able to see numbers correctly because for me it changed completely opposite direction. But that's the expectation for today. Build out the right shoulder, finish building the bearish liquidity, head to the 5 mile. Very likely close around that 5 mile. Okay, because remember, closing at the 5 mile is taking a very neutral position on the market. Um, 5 mile is a range that is going to be gravitated to every 5 trading sessions, you know, on average. So this is starting to look like that range that we need to really be identifying for the next move. Okay, is there any questions or anything that I can answer before I go ahead and head out today? Now that we've kind of really established that the direction of the day definitely does look bearish. Um, Everybody should have absolutely nailed their short positions here, especially on stocks. Um, those 13 calls are. I don't want to look at what they're doing right now. Oh yeah, they're kicking butt. Yeah, we bought those at 0.69 and they're hovering around 0.83. So those are doing very well. And again, those are Friday expiry. So if we're going to be having a selling week this week, which we talked about in my video last night, I highly suggest watching it if you haven't had a chance. But this week was really about heading to the 20 mile or back up to the upper Bollinger. Based on today's price action so far, it's looking like that 20 mile range wants to be hit very, very, very much so. Okay. That's a really great question. Yes and no. Okay, and there's let me kind of reframe this before I answer the question. Yes, ideally you do want the further time. Okay. However, with Spy being the way Spy is, all it takes is a single message, a single tweet, a single um the single right person saying the one thing that doesn't need to be said against your position can cause that position to blow up instantly. Of course we don't want that to happen. That's obviously not what we're looking for when we're trying to trade. So when I'm looking for those longer positions, this is when I start taking stuff like TQQQ, SOXS, SOXL, stuff that has that 5 day inception, or the 5 day expiry by inception. And that way you really have a lot of room to maneuver. So that way if your position does get blown, um, it's not the end of the world because at least you have something to sell the next day. Um, compared to like a SPY put, for example. Say you had that 720. Well, if we have some crazy move to the upside tomorrow, where say the market opens at 722, well, that 720 put is almost worthless at that point. So, unlike a TQQQ, where what was the high of today? 6605. Say we open tomorrow with TQQQ being at 67. Will would our put be down? Absolutely, but it wouldn't be down as bad. So that's how I try to play those longer positions is using some of these um leveraged ETFs. It's not always the best, but this is a very volatile market, and when I say volatile, I don't mean just downside selling. Volatility works both in the upside and downside. So we're in a very volatile trading environment where we see negative volatility spikes and positive volatility spikes. Um, Great price action, but it will absolutely decimate positions if you try to hold them, um, overnight. If they don't have, again, that very long duration to them. Our short positions here kicking absolute butt. Okay, again, we're looking for that 716.46, and technically we are within the upper bounds of the 5 mod now. So we are actually 5 mod testing. With this 5 mod test occurring, this means that we've locked this level in. Okay, this 716 is locked in at this point. Um, so very, very successful day, everybody. I know it was a very difficult day. Again, today out of the scale of 10 was probably a 9 out of 10 in terms of how difficult it was to trade. Today was not an easy day, but as always, if we follow our signals, if we follow um, what's going on with our different investment grade and corporate grade credits, we see this massive leg downward in the HIG. If we watch our volatility and not the VIX, I know that some people think that I'm referring to the VIX. I do not watch the VIX at all. The VIX to me is only an indicator if we're above the bearish conditions or below the bearish conditions. Okay. Um, Basically, I'm looking for that $20 above or below. So overall, the VIX is telling us that we're still in a bullish market. Okay, until we start pushing above that $20 range. I don't care what happens with the VIX in terms of the day to day. It tells me nothing. The VVIX, however, is the futures. This is dealers actively buying in or selling futures contracts. Okay. Um, this isn't retail money. This isn't anybody but the big dogs. So I like listening to the signals that the big dogs tell us because, they're the ones with the big money. At least for now. Give me a couple more years and we'll see how that goes. But the big dogs are definitely telling us that they want to see some selling on the day. The Soxus 56 calls. I think those are the ones I suggested a long time ago, which I actually still feel fairly okay about. However, here's something that I want to really look at, and this is going to be hard because of some of these reverse splits and everything, so I do apologize, but this will look like a mess for a second. So this is the weekly time frame, okay? And as you can see by a mess, this is literally $100 worth of price action in here, okay? Which we had to zoom into like we were looking at an ant. So what's this telling us on a weekly time frame? Is that one, our first, excuse me, I can't talk. Our first target should be that 35.53. Now, why should that be our first target? Because that is the 20 mile on the weekly time frame. Now, have we tested the 20 mile in quite a while? We had a very, very small test in here. Um, Technically that's telling us that we don't need to test the 20 mile for a whole nother 20 weeks. Okay. Now, is that what I'm expecting? No. Okay. But that 20 mile has to be that first target. Um, with this pulling down very aggressively, as quickly as it did, um, it really shifted the focus on that 56 strike. Even if I do think that's within reason, because that's kind of where the upper Bollinger is on the weekly time frame. Um, I think it isn't the best target at this point in the current moment. Even though I do think the end of the year is going to be seeing some massive selling. Um, so it's hard to say, right? It's hard to say, do you sell that position and try to take a leap or a longer position at that 35 strike to catch the 20 mile? Or do you really just hold on and wait, for potentially that upper Bollinger push again on the weekly time frame? It's hard to say, but what I do know is that on the daily time frame, our upper Bollinger is currently at the 2981. So it's even lower than that weekly 20 mile target. So I'd really be trying to target that 35 range currently, even if that means taking a loss in that previous position. Um, Unfortunately, semiconductors had a massive, massive, massive move ever since we had that ceasefire, um, the initial ceasefire agreement take place. I mean, semiconductors went all the way from 306 to currently, pushing the 460, and that's a month's time. Um, Probably one of the largest rallies, actually, probably ever. Um, I do have to back test it, but I do think that this rally in here is probably one of the strongest rallies in history. So, um, it caught a lot of people off guard, and it's unfortunate because we actually did have positions literally right at the bottom, almost to the T. The only issue that I made is that I took the profits literally the day before. I took the profits on my calls at that 20 mile, assuming that the 20 mile was going to continue to reject to the downside. So, um, I kicked myself in the butt massively for this, but I should have had that full upside. So, kind of an unfortunate mistake on my part, but it happens. We're human and we have to learn from it. So, but hopefully that answers your question in terms of those Soxus calls. I definitely think that there's a lot of room within Soxus, but we have to be very careful. Um, and this is actually something I don't like to talk about a lot, but with being honest and everything else, it's good to talk about. Soxus burned me for close to $100,000 last year. It was right before the Oracle earning where they had the 500 billion-dollar injection literally overnight. I mean, I think the Oracle price went from 100 and like 30 to like 330 in a night, something absurd. Um, I had a super large success position, and yeah, absolutely burned the heck out of me. So I do tend to be a lot more cautious when I am taking these positions. If the position's burnt, just cut it off and don't continue to try to ride that, you know. Currently the Sox's price is at 13. You'd have to see a whole additional $50 upside for that call to really take place. Okay. I mean, you'd see profit prior to that, but you understand what I mean. Better to target that 35 range because it's far, far, far more reasonable. Yeah, I think over DCing, I would actually just cut those and take a lower strike. Again, I really like that 35 strike. And I think you said for what, August? Hold on, I wanna look at the price of those. Okay, so for August 26th. Yeah, and the 35 calls right now are, and make sure you don't put a market buy. Okay, this is a big distinction when you're trading some of these ETFs is that you have to put a limit buy between the bid and the ask. So currently the bid is at 0.81, the ask is at a dollar. I'd probably put a bid in for about 0.91 to 0.93. Okay. That gives you all the way until basically the end of August, roughly 3 months, well, a little longer than 3 months. And, is that 35 strike a lot more reasonable? Absolutely. Um, so that's what I would definitely try to do. Seeing some major share buys in SOXS right now, which is, again, the bear ETF for SOX. And we're getting our 460 range we talked about. So today played out like a T, other than Micron kind of, feeding us the hose earlier. But um, absolutely beautiful day. I hope each and every one of you made money today because again, today was pretty much like a 9 out of 10 in terms of difficulty. Um, I mean, even me for a while was starting to get a little shaken up in here once we started pushing above this cup top. Um, but we're seeing the structure we need to take place. Um, Technically, we have not fully invalidated these previous levels, and this is just building that right shoulder that we talked about, at the get-go of the day. So yeah, hopefully everybody did well. Um, Even if you joined late, I told you to take that put at the 20 mile, um, would be up, roughly a whole $3 in terms of that. So, um, yeah, is there any final questions or anything that I can answer anybody? Again, I know today was very difficult, so when we have difficult days like this, and especially when you earlier said that, wow, SPY looks super bullish, mark that down. Okay, just like we did with Micron, like right in here where I wrote this note, and you could do this with Webull. They have this super cool tool, what's called the rectangle tool. So you just draw on it, edit the text, make sure the text color is different than the color of the box or it won't show very well. Press the check mark and then blah. Make sure it's inside the box and centered. And then you can make notes for whatever you want. So today when you said that, wow, market looks super bullish, well, write that down as a note and write some of these notes down of why we also targeted it not being bullish. Um, these are the type of things that are going to really, really elevate you as a trader. This is the type of stuff that the normal people don't do. But going back and analyzing your trades is probably one of the smartest things you can do as a trader. Okay. So make a lot of notes as you trade. Don't be afraid to have notes on your screen. Don't be afraid to, have a notebook with you and literally write stuff down. But as traders, we're pretty much detectives. We're trying to really understand what the dealers are trying to do. I know a lot of people correlate trading to gambling. I heavily, heavily disagree because, as you can see, there was nothing involved with gambling today. Um, it was all an extremely structured trade from the get-go. Even if we originally did have a push against our position due to the Micron move. So, yeah, you're very welcome, everybody. Um, I am going to be trying to stream Monday through Friday, but for the next probably 2 weeks, those streams are going to be the Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But eventually, I am trying to transition this to where I'm streaming each and every trading day so that we can, continue to knock out trades, continue to learn, and, you know, get everybody trading on the right path because you know what, trading is super hard and I want to see everybody succeed, from the bottom of my heart. So, okay, that's enough mushy stuff out of me today. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for tuning in. Um, If you haven't watched Sunday's video, which I posted yesterday, it's a shorter video, but I highly, highly suggest going over it. If you could leave a comment, anything else that helps me a lot with the algorithm. Not that I'm trying to, massively grow because of anything. It's just I do want to grow the school. I do want to grow the learning area. I am trying to get more people into the chat and everything and really make this a very fun and exciting place to trade and learn. So, um, thank you all. Uh, I appreciate each and every one of you for tuning into the stream. Uh, but yeah, I hope you all have a great day and I hope you all were able to um make some great money. But with that said, I will talk to you not in tomorrow, not tomorrow's stream. I won't be making a video tonight, but it'll be in Wednesday's stream that we'll talk again. So if you have any questions or anything, feel free to jot them down and we can always go over them during the stream. So, okay, everybody, take care, enjoy your day, enjoy the short positions, and hopefully y'all made some killer money because I made some great money today. So I'm happy about it. I'm gonna go outside and relax for a bit. So take care, everybody.